Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Monday, the 21st day of October, 2024. And as always, we have the top stories in the news that have something to do with what the Bible says the world is going to be like before the time of the end when Jesus Christ returns and the many events that will precede it. So let's get to the headlines. Number one, we've got stories about an Israeli truce possible with Hezbollah. Now, Israel is playing hardball. Listen to this. Israeli truce demands said to include access to Lebanese airspace to disarm Hezbollah. In other words, if there's going to be a truce, they're going to be make sure this does not happen again with Hezbollah on the northern border. And in doing so, not listening to Joe Biden, Israel bombs Hezbollah's financial centers in Beirut. And this is something that's a huge story. In other words, Netanyahu is not taking Biden's advice and decides to do what needs to get done to get rid of Hezbollah. We are completely at Hezbollah's mercy, said former UN peacekeeper. Now, this is an interesting story. It comes from a Danish news source. They interviewed one of the peacekeepers that was there on the Lebanese border with Israel. UNIFIL was there like a number of years, and he talked about how they were totally at the mercy of Hezbollah. They really couldn't do anything to fulfill the UN resolution there, and it shows the need why Israel must do what they're doing. And finally, the U.S. House Speaker Johnson says they're investigating the leak of Israel attack plans on Iran, and as they should, because some traitor released that to Iran, and Iran published it. And so now we've got a question about who did it. And this shows again why Israel should not be trusting the United States in any way, shape, or form with their plans and what they're going to do. All right, let's get to the headlines. Number one. Israeli truce demands said to include access to Lebanese airspace to disarm Hezbollah. This is from the Times of Israel. A U.S. envoy arrives in Beirut. Jerusalem is reportedly seeking active enforcement of UN Resolution 1701 by the IDF in South Lebanon, a clause seen as unlikely to be accepted by Lebanon. Well, Lebanon hasn't been doing their job since 2006, so it doesn't seem Israel's really going to care here now. Israel handed the United States a document last week with its conditions for a diplomatic solution to the end the war in Lebanon, a report said yesterday, Sunday, as U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein arrived in Beirut for talks on a potential ceasefire. Now, according to a report in Axios, citing two U.S. officials and two Israeli officials, Israel has demanded that IDF troops be allowed to engage in active enforcement to make sure Hezbollah doesn't rearm and rebuild its military infrastructure close to the border, which is definitely a reasonable request. Israel has also demanded that their Air Force will have the freedom of operation in Lebanese airspace, the report added. U.S. official told the news outlet that it was highly unlikely that Lebanon and the international community would agree to Israel's conditions. Here we go, the old international community again. The White House and the Israeli embassy in Washington refused to comment on the report. Now, according to the U.S. news site, Israel wants to be able to conduct active enforcement of UN Security Resolution 1701, which requires that the Lebanese armed forces be the only force with arms in southern Lebanon. Now, get this, as we've said many times, this resolution has largely gone unenforced since it was passed when 18 years ago in 2006. And it's allowed Hezbollah to build up a formidable arms cache and defensive capabilities, which neither UNIFIL, the peacekeepers of the UN, nor the Lebanese army are willing to challenge the Iran-backed terror group. Israel's repeatedly portrayed its offensive in southern Lebanon as essentially stepping in and doing UNIFIL's job for them. This is precisely what they're doing. We're talking about 1701 with increased enforcement. This is from Israel. Our message is that if the Lebanese army and UNIFIL do more, the IDF will do less. And the other way around, the Israeli official is quoted as saying, this is great news. They're finally doing what they should have done years ago. Hochstein will be in Beirut on Monday today for talks with officials on conditions for a ceasefire. Two sources in Lebanon told Reuters. The U.S. envoy is set to meet Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati and Parliament Speaker Navi Berri during his visit. Berri told the Al Arabiya broadcaster over the weekend that Hochstein's visit was the last chance before U.S. elections to reach a truce, and he said he would reject any amendments to UN Resolution 1701. Yeah, well, we'll see them. And thank God Israel's doing what they need to do. And this is something that is absolutely necessary. Since for 18 years, this has not been enforced. Hezbollah has been able to build up an incredible array of tunnels, military armaments, whatever it might be, troops there, elite troops, right on Israel's border, ready to attack, ready to pounce. And the United Nations has done nothing there. In fact, as we're going to see in our third story from the UNIFIL former peacekeeper who went on to remain anonymous, the situation has basically been Hezbollah does whatever it wants, and the United Nations peacekeepers just try and get out of the way. Now, on another story like that, remember Biden just a week or so ago said, "Don't touch Beirut." And please don't bomb Beirut or anything there. Just kind of keep the bombing at a minimum. Well, here's headline number two. Israel bombs Hezbollah's financial centers in Lebanon. They began attacking institutions associated with financial and economic support for Hezbollah. In an announcement, IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari warned, in the past 24 hours, dozens of projectiles have been fired at northern Israel. In the next minutes, we will issue an advance evacuation warning to residents of Beirut and other areas of Lebanon to evacuate locations being used to finance Hezbollah's terror activities. I emphasize here, anyone located near sites used to fund Hezbollah's terror activities must move away from these locations immediately. We will strike several targets in the coming hours and additional targets throughout the night. In the coming days, we will reveal how Iran funds Hezbollah's terrorist activities by using civilian institutions, associations, and non-government organizations that act as fronts for terrorism. Good for them. And so basically, this is where the money is laundered there for Iran through these banks there in Lebanon. And Israel says enough's enough, so we're going to take care of it. We will carry out these strikes tonight and provide updates on the results of the next day, said IDF Arabic spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Avice Andre. Posted a similar and specific warnings on X, formerly Twitter. They've done it in Arabic, so they know what's going to happen. The campaign against financial institutions. Now, this headline here, this last paragraph actually, is really important because it talks about the little evolution of what's going on. The campaign against financial institutions appears to be a fourth stage of the war. In the first stage, lasting 11 months, the IDF simply returned fire or targeted weapons depots and isolated Hezbollah commanders. In the second stage, the IDF attacked the full senior hierarchy of Hezbollah, including in Beirut, and they got rid of Nasrallah and all the, top people there. In the third stage, which began in late September, the IDF has launched this ground operation, which they're pushing through southern Lebanon, moving north. And in the fourth stage now, it is attacking Hezbollah's money sources. So here's the bottom line. Israel means business of ridding the world of Hamas and Hezbollah. This is consistent with the biblical picture of the world, what it'll be like at the time of the end. Namely, Israel is lulled into thinking they'll have some sort of security at their northern border to the place where they don't worry about an attack. In other words, they've getting rid of the scourge already, Hamas pretty much in the south. But Hezbollah is a big worry there in the north because the invasion is going to come from the north and they need to feel secure because they're going to be caught by surprise again, as they have already twice in their history. A third time has been predicted. And so that's why, first and foremost, to be able to being caught by surprise, what do you have to do? Well, you have to think that you're secure, and you have to secure the area where there's no enemy there. That's what's going to take place. All right, headline number three. This comes from the Jerusalem Post, but it's from a Danish news site, BT. It was a story yesterday, and the headline from a former UN peacekeeper says, "We were completely at Hezbollah's mercy. UNIFIL forces were heavily restricted by Hezbollah, and little was done when they reported violations of UN Security Council 1701. A former UN truce supervision organization soldier, that's called UNTSO, UNTSO, under the alias of Michael, testified that UNIFIL was totally subject to Hezbollah when he worked in Lebanon for 10 years in an interview with Danish news site BT on Sunday. This organization was founded in 1948. It was the first peacekeeping mission the United Nations ever created with the mission of monitoring ceasefires, supervising armistice agreements, preventing isolated incidents from escalating, and assisting other UN peacekeeping operations in the region to fulfill their mandates. Now, he had the task, this soldier now, of observing and reporting violations of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which was again put in effect in 2006, which called for southern Lebanon to be without Hezbollah. Despite the organization's missions, now get this, Michael reported, we were totally subject to Hezbollah. We clearly had limited freedom of movement. For example, we never operated after dark for fear of Hezbollah, so they had free time in the evening and the night hours. Now remember, this group was supposed to be guarding this area so Hezbollah wouldn't do anything, yet they were scared to death of them. Michael also said that UNIFIL and UNSO workers had their access to cities in southern Lebanon restricted by Hezbollah, who would stop them when they tried to enter certain areas. They simply blocked the road. They were not visibly armed, but they were aggressive, and it was quite clear they were members of Hezbollah. We knew very well who decided things, especially in the Shiite cities, said Michael. They didn't want to see us. They didn't want us to see what they were doing. Now, he also added his ability to report what was happening to the Security Council was also limited, as Hezbollah terrorists would confiscate his devices if he attempted to collect evidence. Some outsourced workers for UNIFIL and UNSO were also vocally supportive of Hezbollah, Michael recalled. In other words, you got Hezbollah supporters there amongst the United Nations so-called peacekeeping force. He added his ability to report what was happening at the Security Council was limited, and like we said, and the outsourced workers were vocally supportive of Hezbollah. To summarize what the whole story is about. So the bottom line is simply this. Since 2006, when this treaty was made by the UN, when Israel removed its army from southern Lebanon, the United Nations force has been in there and basically done, that's why they're called the United Nothing. Nothing. They were scared of Hezbollah. Hezbollah did what they wanted, build up all these, resources there. Like we said, these tunnels, very sophisticated, much more sophisticated than what's in Gaza, with armaments, many more armaments, with elite army of terrorist soldiers, all this. And they've been bombing Israel, since October 8th of last year for over a year after the Hamas attack took place in southern Israel. And Israel's basically saying enough's enough. This is why Israel must take charge because the United Nations is doing nothing. And again, Guterres, the leader there in the U.S., says, we're not moving UNIFIL out of here. We're going to keep our troops there. Yeah, troops that are basically doing two things. They're being used as human shields or else they're helping Hezbollah fight against Israel. So Israel is doing what it needs to do. And this is very, very good news. But the last story is very, very bad news. The House Speaker says he's investigating leak of Israel's Iran attack plans. This is from Ynet. Remember, we mentioned the other day that the attack plans for Israel's, coming and whatever they're going to do with Iran, it was leaked in great detail. This two top secret documents were leaked. And it was published by by an Iranian group on the source Telegram, and the world picked it up. Some news sources picked it up, and basically they printed what Israel was planning to do. And this was supposed to be a closely guarded secret top secret. In fact, it said top secret between the U.S. and Israel. So House Speaker Michael Johnson, Republican, said, adding he is to be briefed on the matter. Israeli officials said the incident could increase mistrust in Washington. You think so? And they say they hope the leaker is found and prosecuted to prevent similar incidents. This again, the Biden administration showing their lack of concern for Israel. They're investigating a leak of a pair of highly classified intelligence documents describing Israel's preparation for a retaliatory strike on Iran. Johnson said Sunday the documents appeared to have been prepared by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, describing U.S. interpretations of Israeli Air Force and Navy planning based on satellite imagery just recently, October 15th through 16th. And like we said, they began circulating last week on the Telegram messaging app. Israel's been planning a response to the ballistic missile attack carried out on Iran for 3 weeks ago now on October 1st. Its second direct attack on Israel in 6 months. And Israel has intensified its offensive in Gaza, basically waiting after days after the taking of Yahya Sinwar. All right, so here's what's going on right now. The fighting in Lebanon is getting to the place where Israel has just had enough, and they're taking charge, and they need to take charge of southern Lebanon. They need to take charge. They're going to bomb these financial centers. And they said if you try and assassinate one of our leaders, again, remember they tried to assassinate Netanyahu on Saturday. It said we will, destroy everything that has to do with you in Beirut. So it'll just be, cinders, and they can do that. And so Israel means business. So that's where we're at right now. And the limp-wristed Biden administration doesn't want them to do anything. We want to have a peace treaty, want a ceasefire for 21 days or whatever. This kind of nonsense. And much of the Western world is agreeing with that. So we'll see what happens. But thank God Israel is standing up for what it needs to do. Now, again, what we've said, this is consistent with what the Bible teaches about the time of the end, namely that Israel's northern border will be somewhat peaceful. And that's what's going to lull them into thinking there won't be a final invasion, this great invasion. According to Ezekiel 38:39, it'll be Russian led, not Iranian led. So we're seeing the stage being set. We're seeing things getting cleared out. And also, too, we've got the election 2 weeks from tomorrow. It's an incredible time here. So please, I'm sure you're in prayer. Continue in prayer for our country, for our world, and that the Lord would have his way. But first and foremost, and mainly, we get the gospel out, the good news about Jesus Christ. That is the message of this program. That's what we do here. Everything else, this is a means to an end of getting the good news out that people need to know the Lord Jesus as their Savior. So our emphasis is always on the first coming of Christ, not the second coming, because that's what is going to determine everyone's future eternity by what they do with the person of Christ. So we'll keep you posted on all this. Again, like we say, if a huge story breaks, we'll have a special edition of breaking news. Otherwise, we're doing one a day. We will be publishing soon some other things I think will be very helpful for you with respect to last days Bible prophecy. Until then, I'm Don Stewart saying thank you so much for watching. And as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.